Greetings and salutations, guys. I'm here with my review of Spider-Man Brand New Day, the fourth movie in the Tom Holland MCU Spider-Man series, and another really successful installment of a, sort of sub-franchise within the MCU where I think they've really gone 4 for 4. I think that they've all been quite good to great. And even though there's been more of a switch up on the creative side on this film than the others, I still think they really nail what it is we love about Spider-Man and get to kind of show it off in some bigger ways in this installment. This movie is set 4 years after No Way Home, when Peter Parker had that spell cast by Doctor Strange that made everyone forget they ever knew Peter Parker, and he spent the time since just being a kick-ass Spider-Man, but neglecting any personal life for Peter Parker. And this movie is going to be about what happens when sort of his past and his longing for the people in his life slams together with some new threats that he's encountering along the way. It's an interesting mixture here because on one hand, there are some huge name other Marvel characters in this movie. There are a ton of supervillains who pop up in this movie, but it's also kind of a smaller story in a lot of ways. It's a more introspective story, and that's because of where Peter is in his life and what's going on and just kind of how he feels. But in the midst of that, it is the best looking of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies so far. Destin Daniel Cretton takes over here as director, and he does have a lot more visual flair than John Watts. I think John Watts did a great job on the other Spider-Man movies and really captured the essence of who Peter Parker is, but Cretton, who is coming off doing Shang-Chi and Wonder Man, so really on quite a roll here with Marvel characters, he does have more of a flourish. He is better with the action scenes and the web swinging scenes. They really do pop, and there is some real creativity here in what's happening, and just seeing Spidey in action has a lot of really great big thrills, and it doesn't feel like, oh, we've seen Spider-Man do that in a live action movie a million times before. It feels like they're coming up with new creative ways to show off his power set, his skill set, what he can do with his webs. Like I mentioned, this movie is jam-packed with Marvel characters, but I really do think it manages to juggle it in a way that really mostly works. It doesn't feel overstuffed. It reminded me a lot of how James Gunn handled all those characters in Superman last year. There were some concerns going into that movie, like, is it going to feel overstuffed? Is it going to feel like these characters are taking too much screen time? But Spider-Man Brand New Day does what Superman did last year very well, which is it remembers this is a story about the title character, and these other characters, they exist in the world, and they're here to support our title character's story, and sometimes they'll take on a bunch of screen time, and sometimes they'll just be there for a couple scenes, and sometimes they'll just be there for part of a montage. It's a real big mix we get here. As far as the other big Marvel heroes here, look, did Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, need to be in this movie? No, I think they could have made the story work without him, but I also think that they do a good job of making sure that his moments do reflect the themes of the story, and he has a nice scene. Mark Ruffalo has Banner, where he gets to discuss some of the central themes and central conflict that Peter is going through in this movie. And then as the Hulk, there's just some really cool Hulk action. So on one hand, I'd say, okay, maybe they could have trimmed it out if they wanted to make this movie a little shorter. But on the other hand, we're getting to see Spider-Man and the Hulk and the Punisher, more on him in a second, all on screen together. It's absolutely thrilling. And not just in a, oh my gosh, look, point at the screen, look at the things I like. Because Cretton, again, delivers on the action side so well, these characters bouncing off each other get to do so in a really cool way. And you get to see them use their very, very different abilities in a cool way against each other. As for having Jon Bernthal as the Punisher here, he is really awesome. And I know that some people who only want to see the Punisher in the midst of very R-rated style mayhem and violence will probably not love that he is in a PG-13 world here, and he is not going to commit R-rated violence here. But what a wonderful dynamic they have between Frank Castle and Spider-Man. In this movie, Peter Parker's whole thing is he doesn't really have any sort of social life. He doesn't really have any friends in his life. But he knows Frank Castle. They have a history, has two very different New York crime fighters. This movie also plays off the history of Tom Holland and Jon Bernthal, just as two actors who have worked together many times now, including in the Odyssey in theaters right now, and the chemistry they have together, because it is a really strong part of the movie. The banter between these characters, the humor, making them this sort of odd couple duo because they see the world so differently, and yet, they're still going to try to help each other when the chips are down. I really thought it was a really, really satisfying part of the movie was seeing Spider-Man and the Punisher together, and goes back to the comics as far as the history of the Punisher, but the version of it in live action here, these two actors especially, I think just really make it a really special, fun, strangely endearing part of Spider-Man Brand New Day. Of course, Tom Holland as Peter Parker is just very endearing in general, and he gives another really wonderful performance here. He really is a perfect Peter Parker, a perfect Spider-Man. You really feel that he cares about this character. He's invested in this character. This movie's interesting because he's wearing the mask more than ever, and that's just because of where the story is and the fact that nobody knows his identity anymore. So there are long stretches of this movie where he's wearing his mask. It's actually kind of reminiscent of how Ryan Reynolds wears his mask so much in Deadpool. And in both situations, you feel like, well, this actor just loves playing this character so much and he gets why he needs to wear the mask so much. So he's willing to do it. And I just think you really do care about Peter. I mean, people go into the movie caring about him because he's a great character no matter what. But I think Tom Holland's depiction of him, you just really do connect to him, and you do want, you want what's best for him. And he's really struggling in this movie to kind of get some of that back. And I think that Holland does really give a wonderful standout performance here. It's interesting how the movie is structured because of where Peter is in his life. It feels a little episodic because of these people kind of floating in and out and the ethereal nature of a lot of his relationships. Sometimes that can be a little bit clunky, but I also think it's interesting and how it also works for the other co-stars and who kind of gets spotlighted where and for how long. And some actors just kind of have a portion of the movie where they really kind of take center stage, but I think they make the most of it. And one of those people is Zendaya because MJ doesn't know Peter anymore. And she's in this movie and she has a significant role in this movie, but it's a much smaller role screen time wise than in the last two Spider-Man movies for sure. Maybe it's on par with Homecoming or maybe even a little more. When it is the portion of the movie where MJ is the most centered, I think Zendaya makes the most of it. I think the script makes the most of it. And we get to see her have some really interesting moments both with Peter and with another character. And look, Zendaya and Tom Holland, I don't want to shock you by saying they have really good chemistry and they can play off each other really well. And here it's so complicated because of the Doctor Strange spell of it all. And I think that they do a really good job of kind of the dance of how it's now very, very different between them. It has to be so different between them because of what happened in the last film. And then, of course, is Sadie Sink in a mystery role. I'm not going to reveal who it is after all this buildup. I'll just say that, again, that sort of episodic feel the movie has is front and center here because she really comes to sort of take over the movie in a bigger way in the second half. Her character becomes very significant, and I think there's a lot of interesting elements about her character, and I really like Sink playing this role and much of the storyline involving her character and how it really kind of reflects on what Peter is going through. Now, all that being said, there are a couple elements here that I don't think quite land in the way they could. I don't think they're sort of done as elegantly as they could, and they're really in the third act of the movie. I will keep things vague, but one is a big emotional moment that I think maybe lays things on a bit too thick, a bit too on the nose. Near the end, there's also this kind of strangely distracting, silly moment involving a news report. You'll know it when you see it. It just feels like a place where there was maybe some mistrust that the audience would kind of go with something and they felt they needed to over-explain. It's strange because right after something happens that I think would have told you everything you need to know, and now it feels a little like they undercut themselves with this earlier news report sequence. Again, I am harping on something that is pretty quick, a little part of the movie, but it did kind of take me out in the moment in the third act of the film. I don't think Spider-Man Brand New Day matches the highs of No Way Home and sort of that euphoric feeling that movie had in its biggest moments. And yet I still think it's a really good Spider-Man movie in and of itself. And it is definitely, such a visually dynamic Spider-Man movie. So it has some strengths that really do, outmatch Spider-Man No Way Home in some notable ways, even though I think that one is still the crowd pleaser in a bigger way. And, it's a personal favorite for me. But man, I had a good time with Brand New Day as well. And I mentioned Tom Holland and the feeling that, he really loves Spider-Man that I think permeates through in his performance. And I think you also get that from all the filmmakers. You get that from Destin Daniel Cretton here as director. You get it from returning writers, Chris McKenna and Eric Summers. You do feel like, everyone involved knows that Spider-Man is a really special character and is, there's a reason he's had such longevity and there's a reason that people respond to him in the way they do. And this movie being, this sort of more introspective movie and dialing in on him as a character in this isolation is really interesting. And I'm kind of really glad they did it. And even though it's a little choppier as a movie, I think there's some interesting things that they do dig in here with him as a character, and also things that, I think people can just relate to as far as feeling a certain way at a certain time of your life. I also really dug Michael Giacchino's score. It is a bit more quiet and moodier than the ones he did for the previous three Spider-Man movies, in a way that is very fitting for what Peter is going through in this story. So yeah, while there is a little bit of choppiness here to some of the story elements and to some of the shifts it takes, overall I felt a lot of affection for Spider-Man Brand New Day, just like I feel a lot of affection for Spider-Man as a character. And I was very impressed with how it did put so many different characters and so many different elements in, and really did make it work by keeping Peter Parker at the center, always remembering that this is about, how he feels and how these characters sort of affect him in the story and what he's going through. So those are my thoughts on Spider-Man Brand New Day. It's going to be in theaters this weekend. You might have heard about it. There's been a little bit of promotion, and I think some people might be going to the theater to check it out. That it's just my prediction that it will be well attended. We'll see if I'm right. All right, guys, if you can like and subscribe, that would be great. Thanks a lot.